In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, where the golden wheat fields stretch toward distant mountains, there stands a place that shouldn't exist. Not according to everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. The local Kurdish farmers had always called it Potbelly Hill, Göbekli Tepe in their tongue, and for generations they'd noticed the strange stones jutting from the earth like broken teeth of some slumbering giant. Klaus Schmidt first climbed this unremarkable hill on a dusty afternoon in 1994, carrying little more than a backpack, a notebook, and the kind of stubborn curiosity that marks all great archaeologists. The University of Chicago survey team had noted the site decades earlier, dismissing it as nothing more than a medieval cemetery. But Schmidt saw something different in the scattered limestone fragments. He saw intention. He saw design. He saw the impossible. The first magnetometer readings made him pause. Deep beneath the surface, geometric patterns emerged like shadows on his instruments. Perfect circles, massive structures, an organization that spoke of planning and purpose. When the first excavation season began in 1995, Schmidt's team expected to find modest remains, perhaps a small shrine or settlement dating to a few thousand years ago. What they uncovered instead would rewrite the story of human civilization. The limestone pillars emerged from the earth like ancient guardians awakening from a long sleep. Each stood nearly 20 feet tall, carved from single blocks of stone, their T-shaped tops reaching toward the sky with an almost human posture. But it wasn't just their size that took Schmidt's breath away, it was their age. Carbon dating of organic materials found in the surrounding fill layers revealed dates that made archaeologists around the world check their calculations twice. 9,600 BCE, nearly 12,000 years old. To put this in perspective, these stones were already ancient when the first farmers in Mesopotamia were just beginning to plant their earliest crops. They predated Stonehenge by 6,000 years, the pyramids of Egypt by 7,000. They were raised by people who, according to conventional wisdom, were simple hunter-gatherers with neither the social organization nor the technological sophistication to create anything so monumental. As the excavations continued, season after season, the true magnitude of Göbekli Tepe began to reveal itself. This was no single temple, no modest shrine. Ground-penetrating radar indicated that at least 20 stone circles lay buried beneath the hill, each one a massive undertaking that would have required hundreds of workers, sophisticated planning, and resources drawn from across the region. Only a handful have been fully excavated, yet already they've yielded treasures that challenge everything we thought we knew about the deep past. Each circular enclosure follows a similar pattern, yet each is unique in its details. Massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 16 tons, form the center of each circle, standing like silent sentinels surrounded by smaller, but still impressive stones arranged in perfect rings. The central pillars often face each other across the sacred space, as if engaged in some eternal conversation that began when the world was young. But it's the carvings that truly take your breath away. Every surface tells a story in stone, populated by creatures that would have ruled the landscape when these monuments were new. Wild boar charge across the limestone with bristling fury, their tusks caught mid-slash by the ancient sculptor's chisel. Serpents coil and writhe in endless spirals, their scales rendered with such precision you can almost feel their cool touch. Scorpions raise their stingers in eternal threat, while birds of prey spread their wings across the stone sky. Most haunting of all are the human figures, abstract yet unmistakably human forms carved into the pillars themselves. Arms emerge from the stone at shoulder height, hands resting at their sides or clasped across their bellies. These aren't representations of humans. They are the pillars themselves, transformed by the carver's art into silent giants frozen in stone. They watch over the circles with empty faces, guardians of mysteries we're only beginning to understand. The discovery of Enclosure D brought perhaps the most remarkable find yet, a remarkable painted boar statue at Göbekli Tepe, adorned with red, white, and black pigments that have somehow survived nearly 12 millennia. The colors, though faded, still whisper of a time when these stones were not the weathered grey monuments we see today, but vibrant, painted structures that would have blazed with color under the ancient sun. Recent discoveries have only deepened the mystery. Researchers found living quarters of an ancient civilization, which disproved earlier theories that the site served solely as a ceremonial pilgrimage destination. The implications are staggering. This wasn't just a temple complex where people came to worship and departed. People lived here, worked here, made their homes in the shadow of these ancient stones. And now, dear listeners, as we pause in our journey through time, I want to take a moment to welcome you to our little corner of the internet where history comes alive in gentle whispers. If you're finding comfort in these ancient stories, if they're helping you drift toward peaceful sleep, or simply satisfying your curiosity about our mysterious past, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We have so many more gentle adventures through time waiting for you. But before we continue our exploration of Göbekli Tepe, let me leave you with this intriguing thought. Recent research suggests that the intricate V-shaped carvings found throughout the site may actually represent something extraordinary. Perhaps the world's first calendar, a sophisticated system for tracking time that predates any other known calendar by thousands of years. How did these ancient people, supposedly simple hunter-gatherers, develop such advanced astronomical knowledge? That mystery awaits us as we continue our journey. The question that haunted Klaus Schmidt throughout his decades of excavation and continues to puzzle archaeologists today is deceptively simple. Who were these people? The conventional narrative of human development tells us that 12,000 years ago, our ancestors were nomadic hunter-gatherers, small bands of perhaps 20 to 30 individuals who followed the seasonal migrations of animals and the ripening of wild plants. They lived in temporary shelters, owned few possessions beyond what they could carry, and had neither the time nor the social organization to undertake massive construction projects. Yet here at Göbekli Tepe, we find evidence of precisely such projects. Not just one, but dozens of them, created over a span of more than 1,000 years. The logistics alone are staggering. Each of those 16-ton pillars had to be quarried from the living rock, carved with intricate precision, transported to the construction site, and raised into position. This would have required not just raw manpower, but sophisticated knowledge of engineering, physics, and construction techniques. The quarries where these pillars were carved lie scattered across the surrounding hills, some still containing partially completed stones that offer us glimpses into the ancient construction process. Here we can see how the builders carefully outlined each pillar, carving drainage channels to prevent water damage, gradually freeing the massive stones from their rocky matrix. One pillar, never completed, still lies attached to the bedrock, a frozen moment in the construction process that tells us these people worked with patience, precision, and an intimate understanding of stone. But the technical challenges were only part of the puzzle. To organize work on this scale would have required social structures far more complex than anything we associate with hunter-gatherer societies. Someone had to coordinate the labor of hundreds of workers. Someone had to ensure they were fed, housed, and equipped with tools. Someone had to maintain the vision that would sustain such projects across generations. To carve, erect, and bury rings of 7-ton stone pillars would have required hundreds of workers. all needing to be fed and housed. Hence the eventual emergence of settled communities in the area around 10,000 years ago. This observation points to one of the most revolutionary implications of Göbekli Tepe. It suggests that monumental architecture came first, and agriculture followed, not the other way around as we've always assumed. The traditional view held that agriculture led to permanent settlements, which allowed for social stratification, which eventually enabled monumental construction. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence on its head. Here we see monumental construction requiring permanent settlements, which in turn drove the development of agriculture to feed the workers. The implications ripple through everything we thought we knew about the origins of civilization. Archaeological evidence supports this revolutionary timeline. The layers of Göbekli Tepe tell a story of gradual transition from a purely hunter-gatherer lifestyle to one increasingly dependent on domesticated plants and animals. The earliest levels, dating to the site's foundation around 9,600 BCE, show evidence of purely wild food sources. Later levels reveal the gradual introduction of domesticated varieties. First plants, then animals, as if the demands of maintaining this sacred site forced its builders to innovate new ways of feeding themselves. The animal bones found throughout the site tell their own fascinating story. In the earliest levels, we find remains of wild aurochs, wild boar, gazelle, and other game animals, the typical fare of hunter-gatherer societies. But as we move up through the chronological layers, we begin to see evidence of managed herds. Younger animals, different butchering patterns, bones from species that wouldn't naturally occur together. The hunters were becoming herders, driven by the practical needs of feeding the workers who maintain their sacred site. Yet perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Göbekli Tepe isn't what we've found, but what we haven't found. Despite decades of excavation, archaeologists have discovered remarkably little evidence of daily life. No cooking hearths, no storage areas, no refuse pits filled with the detritus of ordinary existence. The site seems to have been kept remarkably clean, almost sterile, as if it existed apart from the mundane concerns of daily survival. This cleanliness extends to the remarkable state of preservation of the carvings themselves. Despite their great age, many retain crisp details that suggest they were regularly maintained, perhaps even repaired or renewed over the centuries. The builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't just constructing monuments. They were creating something meant to endure, something whose importance transcended the immediate concerns of any single generation. The mystery deepens when we consider the site's eventual fate. Around 8,000 BCE, after more than a millennium and a half of use, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Not abandoned, not allowed to decay naturally, but carefully, methodically covered with tons of stone and earth. Someone made the conscious decision to hide these magnificent monuments, to consign them to the earth where they would sleep until Klaus Schmidt's shovel disturbed their slumber nearly 10,000 years later. Who were these people who could conceive such grandeur, execute it with such skill, and then choose to hide it away forever? The question haunts every visitor to Göbekli Tepe, every archaeologist who has worked beneath its ancient stones. They left us no written records, no obvious descendants, no clear trail to follow. They appear in history like ghosts, accomplish the impossible, and then fade back into the mists of prehistory, leaving only their magnificent riddle carved in stone. The morning sun rises over the Anatolian plateau much as it did 12,000 years ago, painting the limestone hills in shades of gold and amber. But if we could step back through time to witness that ancient dawn, we would find ourselves in a world barely recognizable. A world where the familiar rhythms of agricultural life had not yet begun. where vast herds of wild animals moved like living rivers across landscapes unmarked by fence or field. In this primordial world, the builders of Göbekli Tepe moved like shadows between seasons, following paths as ancient as humanity itself. They were hunter-gatherers, yes, but not the simple, struggling bands of popular imagination. These were people who had mastered their environment so completely that they could afford to dream in stone, to commit generations to projects that served no immediate practical purpose. The archaeological evidence paints a picture of remarkable sophistication, hiding behind apparent simplicity. Hunter-gatherers had a lot of free time, working on average 2 days a week to get enough food for the week. This wasn't the desperate, hand-to-mouth existence we often imagine, but rather what anthropologists call the original affluent society. People who met their needs so efficiently that they had abundant leisure time for other pursuits. But what pursuits could motivate people to move 16-ton stones? What vision could sustain such projects across the lifespans of multiple generations? To understand this, we must try to see the world through eyes unclouded by our modern assumptions about progress and civilization. For the builders of Göbekli Tepe, the world was alive in ways we can barely comprehend. Every animal, every plant, every feature of the landscape carried meaning, told stories, participated in a vast web of relationships that connected all things. The elaborate animal carvings that cover every surface of the site aren't mere decoration. They're a kind of written language, a stone library preserving knowledge and beliefs that sustain these people through countless generations. Consider the remarkable sophistication of these carvings. The artists who created them possessed an intimate knowledge of animal anatomy and behavior that could only come from lifetimes of careful observation. The boar bristle with accurately rendered fur, their tusks positioned exactly as they would appear in life. The birds of prey spread wings that show individual feather details. The serpent's coil with the precise musculature of living snakes. This wasn't the work of occasional hunters who glimpsed these animals from a distance. These were carvings made by people who lived alongside these creatures, who understood their habits, their seasonal movements, their role in the greater ecology of the region. The level of detail suggests not just artistic skill, but a kind of zoological knowledge that would do credit to modern naturalists. Yet the animals depicted aren't randomly chosen from the local fauna. They follow specific patterns, appear in particular combinations, seem to be arranged according to principles we're only beginning to understand. Recent analysis has revealed that certain animals appear more frequently in certain enclosures, suggesting that each circular monument might have been dedicated to specific aspects of the natural world or particular seasonal cycles. The mystery deepens when we examine the site's broader context. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built in isolation. Across southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, archaeologists have discovered a whole constellation of related sites from the same period. Navoli Kori, Keonu, Halansemi, and most recently, Karahan Tepe. Each site shares certain characteristics with Göbekli Tepe. Monumental stone architecture, sophisticated carvings, evidence of complex social organization. Yet each also has its own distinctive features, its own local variations on common themes. We have a 7'6" human statue, a vulture statue, as well as a new enclosure at Karahan Tepe. These recent discoveries at sites related to Göbekli Tepe continue to expand our understanding of just how widespread and sophisticated this ancient culture was. We're not dealing with a single isolated miracle, but rather with an entire civilization that flowered in the highlands of ancient Anatolia. A civilization that left monumental traces across hundreds of square miles. The scale of coordination required for such widespread construction suggests social networks far more complex than anything we associate with hunter-gatherer societies. These weren't random bands of nomads stumbling across building techniques. This was an organized culture with shared beliefs, common artistic traditions, and the ability to coordinate major projects across vast distances. How did they communicate across such distances? How did they share techniques, coordinate resources, maintain common artistic and religious traditions? We have no written records from this period, no obvious evidence of the administrative systems that would later characterize the great civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Yet somehow, these people managed to create and maintain a coherent culture across a territory the size of a modern nation. The answer may lie in the sites themselves. Göbekli Tepe and its sister sites weren't just monuments. They were gathering places, pilgrimage destinations where scattered bands could come together to share knowledge, trade goods, arrange marriages, and renew the social bonds that held their world together. The elaborate feasting areas found at many of these sites support this interpretation. These were places designed to accommodate large numbers of people, if only temporarily. Archaeological evidence suggests that these gatherings weren't casual affairs, but carefully orchestrated events timed to seasonal cycles. The animal bones found at the sites often show evidence of mass butchering, as if entire herds were processed at once to feed large congregations. The stone bowls and grinding implements found scattered throughout the monuments speak of feast preparation on an enormous scale. But these weren't just social gatherings, they were construction seasons. There is permanent construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction activity at Göbekli Tepe, and the intensity of work indicates something else than pure maintenance. Most likely the act of working at the site was central to the builders and repeated periodically, whether or not a real need existed. This observation reveals something profound about the builders' relationship to their monuments. They weren't just creating structures, they were participating in ongoing acts of creation that seemed to have been as important as the final product. The work itself was sacred, a form of communal ritual that brought scattered communities together in shared purpose. Evidence for this can be seen in the seemingly endless modifications and rebuilding that characterizes the site. Pillars were moved, enclosures rebuilt, new carvings added to existing stones. Rather than following a master plan executed once and then left alone, Göbekli Tepe seems to have been in constant flux, continuously modified by successive generations of builders. This pattern of continuous construction and reconstruction suggests something remarkable about these people's conception of time and permanence. Modern construction aims to create structures that will endure unchanged for as long as possible. The builders of Göbekli Tepe seem to have had a different relationship with their monuments, one that valued the ongoing process of creation as much as the created object itself. Perhaps this explains one of the site's most puzzling features: its deliberate burial around 8000 BCE. Rather than abandoning the site or allowing it to decay naturally, someone made the enormous effort to cover every monument with carefully arranged layers of stone and earth. This wasn't destruction, it was preservation of a different sort, a way of ensuring that the work of generations wouldn't be lost to the erosions of time and weather. The burial was as carefully planned and executed as the original construction. Different materials were used in different layers. Fine sand near the monuments themselves, then progressively larger stones, creating a protective cocoon that would shield the carved pillars from the elements. Whoever buried Göbekli Tepe intended for it to survive intact until some future generation might have need of it again. But why bury it at all? What changed in their world that made these magnificent monuments something to be hidden rather than celebrated? The timing provides a clue. The The burial of Göbekli Tepe coincides roughly with the spread of agriculture throughout the region. The transition from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle that had sustained humanity for tens of thousands of years to the settled, farming communities that would eventually give rise to the first cities. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe represented something that couldn't survive this transition, a way of seeing the world, a relationship with the natural environment, a form of social organization that was incompatible with the new agricultural lifestyle. The monuments may have been buried not out of neglect, but out of respect, a final act of preservation by people who knew that their world was ending and wanted to ensure that some trace of it would survive for future generations to discover. Recent discoveries continue to illuminate the sophistication of these ancient builders. The V-shaped carvings found on the stone pillar at Göbekli Tepe could represent days in a solar calendar. If this interpretation is correct, it means the builders possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge, the ability to track celestial cycles with precision that rivals modern calendars. The implications are staggering. Creating an accurate solar calendar requires careful observation of the sun's movement across the sky throughout the year, the ability to identify solstices and equinoxes, and mathematical skills sufficient to reconcile the approximate 365.25-day solar year with lunar months. This is advanced astronomy, the kind of sophisticated knowledge we associate with later civilizations like the Babylonians and Egyptians. Yet here we have evidence that hunter-gatherers in ancient Anatolia may have possessed such knowledge thousands of years earlier. How did they acquire it? How did they maintain it across generations without written records? How did they pass such complex information from teacher to student using only oral tradition? The answer may lie in the monuments themselves. Göbekli Tepe and its related sites may have functioned as a kind of three-dimensional textbook, encoding astronomical and seasonal information in stone where it could be preserved indefinitely. The positions of the pillars, the orientations of the enclosures, the specific animals carved on particular stones. All of these may carry information about celestial cycles, seasonal changes, the optimal times for hunting particular animals or gathering specific plants. This interpretation transforms our understanding of what these monuments were for. Rather than simple temples or gathering places, they may have been sophisticated teaching tools, places where the accumulated knowledge of generations was preserved in stone and transmitted to new initiates. The elaborate carvings weren't just art. They were mnemonics, memory aids that helped preserve crucial information about the natural world. Such a system would explain how these people maintained their sophisticated knowledge without writing, how they coordinated activities across vast distances, how they sustained complex projects across multiple generations. The monuments themselves were their libraries, their universities, their administrative centers. Everything they needed to know about their world was encoded in stone, waiting to be read by those who understood the language. This interpretation also helps explain the site's eventual burial. As agricultural societies developed writing systems and new ways of storing and transmitting knowledge, the old stone libraries may have become obsolete. Rather than allowing them to decay, the last generation to understand their meaning may have chosen to preserve them intact, buried like time capsules for some future generation to rediscover. The builders of Göbekli Tepe remain mysterious, but they're no longer invisible. Through careful analysis of their monuments, their tools, their refuse, and their bones, we're beginning to glimpse the outlines of a remarkable civilization that flourished at the dawn of human history. They were neither primitive savages nor lost advanced civilizations, but something perhaps more remarkable. People very much like ourselves, facing the eternal human challenges of survival, meaning, and connection. and responding with creativity, sophistication, and a vision that could literally move mountains. In the hushed hours before dawn, when the modern world still sleeps and the ancient stones stand sentinel against the star-filled sky, Göbekli Tepe reveals its most profound secrets. The T-shaped pillars, weathered by millennia yet still proud in their silence, hold stories within their limestone hearts. Stories carved in symbols we're only beginning to understand. Stories that speak of humanity's first attempts to capture the infinite in stone. To walk among these monuments in the early morning light is to enter a gallery of the world's oldest art. A museum where every surface tells a tale of life and death, of seasons and ceremonies, of the delicate dance between human consciousness and the natural world. But these aren't random decorations applied by idle hands. Every carving, every symbol, every positioned stone seems to follow patterns and principles that suggest a sophisticated understanding of both artistic composition and deeper meaning. The language written in these stones is unlike anything that would follow in human history. There are no phonetic symbols here, no representations of spoken words, no attempts to capture the linear flow of speech in visual form. Instead, the builders of Göbekli Tepe chose to communicate through images that spoke directly to the visual cortex, that bypassed the analytical mind and spoke straight to the intuitive understanding that connects all living things. Consider the serpent motifs that wind across countless stones throughout the site. These aren't naturalistic depictions of specific snake species, though they show clear understanding of serpentine anatomy and movement. Rather, they seem to represent something more fundamental. The concept of serpentine motion itself, the S-curve that appears in flowing water, in the flight of birds, in the movement of energy through living systems. The serpents at Göbekli Tepe often appear in specific contexts, associated with particular other symbols, positioned in ways that suggest they're part of larger narratives or conceptual frameworks. Some writhe in isolation, perfect expressions of pure movement frozen in stone. Others interact with human figures, coiling around arms or torsos in ways that suggest neither threat nor worship, but rather some form of integration or partnership between human and natural forces. The bird imagery presents equally complex layers of meaning. Vultures, cranes, ducks, and birds of prey appear throughout the site, but not as mere decorative elements. Their placement seems deliberate, their interactions with other symbols carefully orchestrated to convey specific messages. Many appear to be engaged in activities that mirror human behaviors: gathering, protecting, observing, leading. The most famous of these avian figures appears in what archaeologists call the vulture stone of Enclosure D, where a massive bird spreads its wings over a scene that has been interpreted as everything from a creation myth to a star map. Recent analysis suggests it may indeed represent astronomical observations, with various elements of the carving corresponding to constellations visible in the night sky during the monument's active period. The V-shaped carvings found on the stone pillar at Göbekli Tepe could represent days in a solar calendar. But the astronomical significance of the site may extend far beyond simple calendar keeping. The positioning of various enclosures, the orientations of key pillars, and the specific celestial objects carved into the stones all suggest that Göbekli Tepe functioned as a kind of stone observatory, a place where careful observations of the heavens were recorded and preserved. This astronomical interpretation gains support from the remarkable precision with which the site was constructed. In Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists have uncovered a handful of circular Neolithic structures, such as this one, Enclosure C, which consist of two T-shaped pillars surrounded by a bunch of slightly smaller inward-facing pillars. The geometric precision of these arrangements suggests sophisticated planning abilities and possibly advanced mathematical knowledge. Each enclosure follows what appears to be a master plan based on precise geometric principles. The circles aren't approximate or rough. They're mathematically exact, suggesting the builders possessed tools and techniques for measuring and constructing perfect circular forms. The positioning of pillars within each circle follows patterns that may encode specific information about astronomical cycles, seasonal changes, or ceremonial activities. The anthropomorphic features of the central pillars add another layer of meaning to these geometric arrangements. The carved arms, positioned at precisely human shoulder height, the suggestion of bodies within the T-shaped forms, the way pairs of central pillars seem to face each other like figures in conversation. All of these elements transform abstract geometric forms into something approaching portraiture. But who are these silent stone figures? Some archaeologists suggest they represent ancestors, the founding fathers and mothers of the communities that built and maintain the site. Others propose they're representations of shamans or spiritual leaders, individuals who served as intermediaries between the human community and the broader natural world. Still others see them as archetypal figures, representing not specific individuals, but rather fundamental aspects of the human condition. The clothing and ornaments carved on some of the pillars provide clues to the social world of their creators. We see loincloths, belts, ornamental neck pieces that suggest a culture with well-developed textile traditions and personal decoration. Some figures wear fox fur caps or carry pouches and tools, indicating specialized roles or ranks within their society. These details paint a picture of people far more sophisticated in their material culture than we might expect from supposed primitive hunter-gatherers. The animal imagery surrounding these anthropomorphic pillars seems to represent the natural world over which these figures held some form of authority or relationship. Wild boar charge across the stones with bristling fury, but they're contained within the architectural framework, suggesting they're under control, or at least in dialogue, with the human figures at the center of each enclosure. The scorpions present perhaps the most intriguing symbolic challenge. These arachnids appear throughout the site in positions and contexts that seem significant, but their meaning remains largely mysterious. Some appear to threaten human figures, others seem protective or benevolent. In certain contexts, they're associated with transformation or rebirth, perhaps drawing on the scorpion's ability to shed its skin and emerge renewed. Recent discoveries have added new elements to this stone vocabulary. The discoveries include a remarkable painted boar statue at Göbekli Tepe, adorned with red, white, and black pigments that have survived nearly 12 millennia. The fact that any paint has survived at all suggests that much of what we see today as grey limestone was once blazing with color, that these monuments would have presented a visual spectacle far more dramatic than their current weathered state suggests. The painted boar reveals details invisible in the carved stones alone. We can see patterns in the pigmentation that suggest specific symbolic meanings, decorative elements that may have carried information about the animal's significance within the broader symbolic framework of the site. The preservation of these colors also suggests that the site was protected from the elements for much of its history, perhaps covered or enclosed in ways that have left no trace in the archaeological record. But paint wasn't the only way the builders added meaning to their stones. Throughout the site, archaeologists have discovered evidence of deliberately created acoustic effects, areas where the shape and positioning of stones create distinctive sound environments. Certain enclosures seem designed to amplify human voices, creating natural amphitheaters where speakers could address large gatherings without strain. Other areas appear designed to create specific types of echoes or resonances, perhaps to enhance the effectiveness of musical performances or ritual chanting. The positioning of pillars in some enclosures creates acoustic sweet spots, where sounds produced at specific locations are enhanced and focused, while sounds from other positions are muffled or distorted. These acoustic properties suggest that Göbekli Tepe wasn't just meant to be seen. It was meant to be heard, experienced through multiple senses simultaneously. The ceremonies that took place within these stone circles would have engaged participants through visual spectacle, tactile experience of the carved stones, and carefully orchestrated sound environments that enhanced the psychological impact of whatever activities took place there. The question of what activities actually took place within these circles remains largely unanswered. The cleanliness of the archaeological record, the absence of hearths, refuse pits, or other evidence of daily activities, suggests that the spaces were kept ceremonially pure, used only for specific ritual purposes rather than general community gatherings. Yet the scale of the constructions suggests they were designed to accommodate significant numbers of people. The circular arrangement of the pillars would have allowed hundreds of individuals to gather within each enclosure, all with clear sight lines to the central pair of anthropomorphic pillars. This suggests ceremonies involving large congregations, perhaps seasonal gatherings that brought together communities from across the region. The symbolic vocabulary carved into these stones may have served as a kind of script for these ceremonies, providing cues for ritualized activities, seasonal observations, or the recitation of traditional stories. The repetition of certain motifs across different enclosures suggests standardized elements within whatever traditions were practiced here, while the unique variations in each circle allowed for local adaptations or specialized functions. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Göbekli Tepe symbolic system is its apparent emphasis on transformation and transition. Many of the carved scenes seem to depict moments of change. Animals in motion, figures in the act of transformation, serpents shedding their skins, birds taking flight. This focus on transition may reflect the site's role in marking seasonal changes, life passages, or other moments of transformation in the community's experience. The placement of certain symbols at specific points within each enclosure also suggests sophisticated understanding of how human psychology responds to visual stimuli. Important symbols often appear at eye level when viewers stand in particular positions, creating focal points that would naturally draw attention during ceremonies. Other symbols are positioned to be discovered gradually, revealed only as participants moved through the space in specific patterns. This careful orchestration of visual experience suggests that the builders understood something profound about how symbolic information affects human consciousness. They weren't just decorating their monuments. They were creating environments designed to induce specific psychological states, to facilitate particular types of awareness or understanding in those who experienced them. The ultimate fate of this symbolic system adds a final layer of mystery to our understanding of Göbekli Tepe. When the site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, this entire vocabulary of meaning was consigned to silence. The symbols that had guided communities for more than a millennium were carefully covered with stone and earth, preserved like a message in a bottle for future generations to decode. Was this burial an act of preservation or abandonment? Did the people who covered these monuments intend for them to be rediscovered, or were they trying to permanently close a chapter in human history? The careful nature of the burial suggests preservation rather than destruction. But preservation for whom? For what purpose? Perhaps the answer lies not in the burial itself, but in what followed. The end of Göbekli Tepe's active period coincides with the beginning of agriculture in the region, the start of humanity's long journey toward civilization as we know it. Perhaps the people who buried these monuments understood that their way of life was ending, that the intimate connection with the natural world encoded in their stone symbols would soon be replaced by new relationships with domesticated plants and animals, new forms of social organization, new ways of understanding humanity's place in the cosmos. In choosing to preserve their monuments rather than destroy them, they may have been leaving us a gift, a window into a way of seeing and being that predates our agricultural assumptions about human nature and human potential. The stones of Göbekli Tepe speak to us across 12 millennia, reminding us that our ancestors were neither primitive nor simple, but rather the inheritors of sophisticated traditions that connected them intimately with the rhythms of the natural world. Picture, if you will, the ancient landscape of southeastern Anatolia during the autumn months, when the first chill touches the morning air and the wild herds begin their seasonal migrations. Across hundreds of square miles of rolling hills and river valleys, small bands of hunter-gatherers read the subtle signs that tell them the great gathering time approaches. Smoke signals rise from distant peaks, carrying messages in a code older than memory. Paths worn smooth by countless generations of feet begin to show fresh tracks as communities abandon their temporary camps and turn their faces toward the sacred hill. They come from the forested slopes of the Taurus Mountains, where the last brown bears still roam between ancient oaks. They descend from the high plateaus where wild sheep graze beneath endless skies. They follow the river valleys where aurochs drink at dawn and wild boar root through riverside meadows. All roads lead to Göbekli Tepe, where the stone giants wait with infinite patience for their annual awakening. The logistics of such gatherings would have been staggering by any measure, but especially for people we've traditionally considered simple nomads. Recent analysis of animal bones found at Göbekli Tepe suggests that during active periods, the site hosted feasts involving hundreds, possibly thousands of animals. The bones show evidence of systematic butchering on a massive scale, not the gradual consumption of game by small bands, but the rapid processing of entire herds by organized teams of specialists. These weren't casual barbecues. The bone analysis reveals evidence of sophisticated food preparation techniques, including smoking, drying, and other preservation methods that would allow large quantities of meat to be stored and distributed over extended periods. The stone bowls and grinding implements found throughout the site could have processed enormous quantities of wild grains, nuts, and other plant foods to feed the assembled multitudes. To understand the scale of organization required, consider that feeding 1,000 people for even a week would require not just the animals themselves, but the infrastructure to process them, the tools to prepare them, the containers to serve them, and the social structures to ensure fair distribution. This is logistical complexity that rivals the supply chains of much later civilizations. The physical evidence of these gatherings is preserved in the archaeological record like frozen moments from humanity's distant past. Layers of ash and bone mark the locations of massive cooking fires, some so large they would have required entire trees to fuel them. The distribution of these fire sites across the complex suggests coordinated cooking activities, with different areas specializing in different aspects of food preparation. Perhaps one area for roasting large game, another for processing plant foods, yet another for the preparation of special ceremonial dishes. But food was only one aspect of these remarkable gatherings. The site's acoustic properties suggest that sound played a crucial role in whatever activities took place within the stone circles. Recent experiments have demonstrated that the positioning of the T-shaped pillars creates remarkable acoustic effects, amplifying certain frequencies while filtering out others. A person standing at the center of enclosure D, for instance, can speak in a normal voice and be clearly heard throughout the entire circle, while sounds from outside the enclosure are significantly muffled. These acoustic properties weren't accidental. The builders of Göbekli Tepe understood principles of acoustics that wouldn't be formally described by scientists until thousands of years later. They designed their monuments to create specific sound environments, suggesting that auditory experience was as important as visual spectacle in whatever ceremonies took place there. Imagine the scene as darkness falls on one of these ancient gatherings. Hundreds of people arranged in concentric circles around the central pillars, their faces lit by flickering firelight that makes the carved animals seem to dance and writhe in the shifting shadows. In the acoustic sweet spot at the center, a speaker's voice carries clearly to every listener, weaving stories that connect the assembled communities to their shared understanding of the world. The stories themselves are lost to us, preserved in no written record, but the physical context suggests their themes. The animal carvings that surround every gathering space speak of humanity's complex relationship with the natural world, not the simple predator-prey relationship we might expect, but something more nuanced, more collaborative. The beasts carved in stone don't flee from human presence. They interact with it, participate in it, seem to share in whatever activities the monuments were designed to facilitate. The V-shaped carvings found on the stone pillar at Göbekli Tepe could represent days in a solar calendar, suggesting that these gatherings were timed according to precise astronomical observations. The ability to predict optimal gathering times would have been crucial for coordinating the movements of scattered communities across such vast territories. Too early, and the seasonal resources wouldn't be available to support large numbers of people. Too late, and the changing weather might make travel difficult or dangerous. The astronomical sophistication implied by such calendar systems suggests that at least some members of these communities possessed detailed knowledge of celestial cycles. These would have been the timekeepers, the astronomers, the holders of specialized knowledge that made the great gatherings possible. Their understanding of the heavens would have been both practical and spiritual, combining precise observation with deep meaning-making about humanity's place in the cosmic order. Evidence for such astronomical specialists can be seen in the careful alignments of various monuments throughout the site. Different enclosures point toward different celestial phenomena, some toward the rising points of specific stars, others toward solstice positions of the sun, still others toward the extreme positions of the moon's monthly cycle. This suggests not just casual skywatching, but systematic, multi-generational programs of observation and record-keeping. The implications ripple through our understanding of hunter-gatherer societies. We're not dealing with people who lived entirely in the present, responding only to immediate needs and opportunities. These were communities with long-term planning abilities, with institutions capable of preserving and transmitting complex knowledge across generations, with social structures sophisticated enough to coordinate activities across vast territories and extended time periods. But the gatherings at Göbekli Tepe weren't just about astronomy and feast logistics. They were about something more fundamental to human nature: the need for connection, for shared meaning, for experiences that transcend the boundaries of individual communities and create larger identities. The evidence suggests that people traveled hundreds of miles to participate in these events, leaving behind the familiar territories where they spent most of their lives to join in something greater than themselves. The pilgrimage aspect of these gatherings would have been transformative in itself. The journey to Göbekli Tepe would have taken many communities through unfamiliar territories, exposing them to different landscapes, different resources, different ways of adapting to environmental challenges. The knowledge gained during these travels would have been as valuable as anything learned at the destination itself. Recent discoveries of similar sites throughout the region, Karahan Tepe with its 7-foot 6-inch human statue, a vulture statue, as well as a new enclosure, suggest that Göbekli Tepe was part of a broader network of sacred sites, each serving similar functions for different regional populations. This implies a level of cultural coherence across southeastern Anatolia that rivals the integration achieved by much later agricultural civilizations. The exchange of knowledge at these gatherings would have been extensive and systematic. Communities from different regions would have brought news of their local environments, which plants were thriving, where animal populations were shifting, how weather patterns were changing. This information sharing would have been crucial for survival in a world where local variations in climate or resources could mean the difference between abundance and starvation. But the exchange went beyond practical information. The artistic traditions evident in the monuments suggest sophisticated systems for sharing aesthetic knowledge, symbolic vocabularies, and ceremonial practices. The consistency of carving styles across different enclosures, built over centuries by different communities, implies active teaching and learning, with master craftsmen passing their skills to apprentices who would carry those traditions back to their home territories. The tool technologies found at the site also suggest knowledge exchange on a remarkable scale. Stone tools from Göbekli Tepe show influences from across the Middle East and beyond, with techniques and materials that indicate contact with communities hundreds of miles away. Obsidian from volcanic regions, specialized flint from distant quarries, innovative hafting techniques that suggest rapid spread of technological innovations across the network of connected communities. Perhaps most intriguingly, the site shows evidence of what archaeologists call experimental architecture, structures that seem designed to test new building techniques or explore different approaches to monument construction. Some enclosures show evidence of being dismantled and rebuilt multiple times, suggesting that the act of construction itself was as important as the final product. This experimental approach implies communities of practice, groups of specialists who were constantly refining their techniques, sharing innovations, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with Stone Age technology. The sophistication of the final monuments suggests that this experimental phase lasted for generations, with each building season adding to the accumulated knowledge of how to work with massive stones, how to carve intricate details, how to create structures that would endure across centuries. The social dynamics of these construction projects would have been as complex as the technical challenges. Coordinating the labor of hundreds of workers requires leadership structures, task specialization, resource allocation systems, and conflict resolution mechanisms. The evidence suggests that these communities developed sophisticated approaches to all of these challenges, creating temporary but highly effective organizations that could accomplish monumental tasks, and then dissolve back into the smaller social units of daily life. The seasonal nature of the gatherings also meant that the monuments served as repositories of accumulated effort, places where the work of many brief construction seasons was preserved and consolidated. Each year's gathering would have added new elements, refined existing structures, and maintained the work of previous generations. The monuments grew organically over time, shaped by the collective vision of dozens of communities working across many generations. This organic growth pattern helps explain some of the apparent inconsistencies in the site's layout. Rather than following a single master plan, Göbekli Tepe evolved according to the changing needs and interests of its builders. New enclosures were added as new communities joined the gatherings. Existing structures were modified as ceremonial practices evolved. The entire complex became a kind of three-dimensional record of the cultural history of the region, with each modification preserving traces of the community that made it. The decision to bury the site around 8000 BCE must be understood in this context of organic growth and evolution. The burial wasn't a sudden decision, but rather the culmination of a long process of change that had been transforming both the monuments and the communities that built them. The rise of agriculture was beginning to change how people related to the landscape, how they organized their societies, how they understood their place in the world. The great gatherings at Göbekli Tepe may have become casualties of their own success. As the communities involved grew larger and more complex, as their needs changed and their social structures evolved, the simple seasonal pattern of gathering and dispersal may no longer have served their purposes. The development of permanent agricultural settlements would have created new centers of gravity, new focal points for community life. Yet the careful burial of the monuments suggests that their importance wasn't forgotten. Someone, perhaps the last generation to fully understand the old ways, made the enormous effort to preserve these symbols of a vanishing world. The burial was as carefully planned and executed as the original construction, using different materials in precisely arranged layers to create a protective environment that would preserve the carved stones indefinitely. In doing so, they left us more than just archaeological artifacts. They left us a challenge to understand ways of being human that don't fit our modern categories, communities that combined mobility with monumentality, egalitarianism with specialization, spiritual sophistication with technological innovation. The great gatherings at Göbekli Tepe remind us that human creativity and social organization have taken forms we're only beginning to appreciate, forms that may have lessons for our own increasingly complex and interconnected world. As our journey through the deep past draws toward its close, we find ourselves standing once again among the weathered stones of Göbekli Tepe, but now with eyes open to possibilities we could never have imagined when we first climbed this ancient hill. The morning light that illuminates these monuments today falls upon stones that have witnessed the great turning of human history. The moment when our species stepped across an invisible threshold from one way of being to another, leaving behind patterns of life that had sustained us for tens of thousands of years. The silence that surrounds us now is pregnant with all the voices that once filled these circles. The stories that connected scattered communities to their shared understanding of the world. The songs that marked the changing seasons. The discussions that shaped the collective decisions of peoples whose names we'll never know. In this silence, we can hear the echo of something profound. The sound of humanity beginning to dream in stone, to conceive projects that would outlast individual lifetimes, to imagine futures that stretched beyond the immediate concerns of survival. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe isn't just about the technical achievements of its builders, remarkable though those achievements were. The deeper mystery lies in understanding what drove human beings to undertake such projects in the first place, to commit generations of labor to creating something that served no obvious practical purpose, to invest so heavily in permanence when their lives were otherwise characterized by constant movement and adaptation to changing circumstances. Recent research continues to illuminate new aspects of this ancient puzzle. The discoveries include a remarkable painted boar statue at Göbekli Tepe, adorned with red, white, and black pigments that have somehow survived nearly 12 millennia. Such preservation suggests that much of what we see today as weathered grey limestone was once blazing with color, that these monuments would have presented a visual spectacle far more dramatic and emotionally powerful than their current subdued appearance suggests. The implications of this painted decoration extend far beyond mere aesthetics. Color has always been one of humanity's most powerful tools for encoding meaning, for creating emotional responses, for marking the sacred as distinct from the mundane. The builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't just creating durable monuments. They were creating environments designed to induce specific psychological states, to facilitate particular types of awareness or understanding in those who experienced them. The sophistication of their color technology also suggests a level of chemical knowledge we don't typically associate with hunter-gatherer societies. Creating pigments that could survive 12,000 years of burial requires understanding of mineral chemistry, of how different substances interact with stone and environmental conditions, of how to process raw materials into stable, long-lasting compounds. This is applied science of a high order, evidence of systematic experimentation and knowledge accumulation across generations. But perhaps the most profound implication of the painted decorations is what they suggest about the builder's conception of time and permanence. Why invest such effort in creating colors that would fade, decorations that would require constant maintenance and renewal? The answer may lie in understanding that for these people, the act of renewal itself was sacred, that the ongoing process of caring for their monuments was as important as the monuments themselves. This perspective transforms our understanding of what these structures were meant to accomplish. Rather than being built once and then left to endure unchanged, Göbekli Tepe seems to have been designed as a living system, a set of structures that required ongoing participation from their builders to maintain their full meaning and function. The monuments weren't just repositories of ancient wisdom. They were mechanisms for ensuring that each generation would have to actively engage with that wisdom, would have to make it their own through the process of renewal and maintenance. The V-shaped carvings found on the stone pillar at Göbekli Tepe could represent days in a solar calendar, and recent analysis suggests this calendar system was far more sophisticated than initially realized. The positioning of these marks, their relationship to other carved elements, and their distribution across multiple monuments all point to a comprehensive system for tracking not just solar years, but lunar months, seasonal variations, and possibly even longer cycles related to celestial phenomena visible only over decades or centuries. Creating such a system would have required not just careful observation, but also mathematical sophistication sufficient to reconcile different types of cycles. The challenge that continues to complicate calendar systems to this day. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may have solved problems in mathematical astronomy that wouldn't be formally addressed by other civilizations for thousands of years. More remarkably, they seem to have embedded this astronomical knowledge directly into the physical structure of their monuments. The calendar wasn't a separate tool that could be lost or forgotten. It was integral to the architecture itself, preserved in stone where it could survive any disruption of the social systems that created it. This suggests a deep understanding of the fragility of human knowledge and a determination to preserve essential information in the most durable form possible. The astronomical implications extend beyond mere timekeeping. Recent analysis has identified possible correlations between the animal imagery at Göbekli Tepe and ancient constellation patterns, suggesting that the carved creatures may represent a form of star map, a way of preserving knowledge about celestial navigation and seasonal timing in symbolic form. The serpents that wind across so many stones may represent the path of the ecliptic, the apparent movement of the sun through the stellar background over the course of the year. If this interpretation is correct, then Göbekli Tepe functioned as a kind of three-dimensional astronomy textbook, encoding sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics in forms that could be understood and transmitted without written language. The monuments would have served as training tools for successive generations of skywatchers, preserving and transmitting knowledge essential for navigation, timing, and perhaps spiritual practices tied to celestial events. This astronomical interpretation also helps explain the apparent emphasis on permanent construction using techniques designed to last for millennia. If the monuments encoded essential knowledge about celestial cycles that played out over decades or centuries, then preserving them intact would have been crucial for maintaining cultural continuity across extended time periods. The recent discoveries at related sites continue to expand our understanding of the cultural complexity that produced Göbekli Tepe. Karahan Tepe, with its 7-foot 6-inch human statue, a vulture statue, as well as a new enclosure, demonstrates that the sophisticated architectural and artistic traditions we see at Göbekli Tepe were part of a broader cultural phenomenon spanning hundreds of square miles and involving numerous distinct communities. These discoveries suggest something remarkable about the social organization of Neolithic Anatolia. Rather than isolated bands of hunter-gatherers occasionally coming together for trade or intermarriage, we're seeing evidence of a coherent cultural system with shared artistic traditions, common architectural principles, and coordinated approaches to monumental construction. This is cultural complexity on a scale that challenges our basic assumptions about pre-agricultural societies. The implications ripple through our understanding of human social evolution. The traditional narrative holds that complex societies emerged only after the development of agriculture provided the food surpluses necessary to support social stratification and specialization. But Göbekli Tepe and its related sites suggest that the relationship between social complexity and agricultural development may be the reverse of what we've assumed. Instead of agriculture enabling complex societies may have driven the development of agriculture. The logistical challenges of maintaining sites like Göbekli Tepe, feeding the workers, coordinating construction activities, managing the seasonal gatherings that brought communities together, may have created pressures that forced innovation in food production and social organization. This reversal has profound implications for how we understand the origins of civilization itself. Rather than viewing monumental architecture as a consequence of agricultural surplus, we might need to see it as a cause of agricultural innovation. The temples came first, and the farms followed, driven by the practical necessities of maintaining increasingly complex sacred sites and social systems. The evidence from Göbekli Tepe supports this interpretation. The earliest levels of the site show evidence of purely hunter-gatherer lifestyles, but later levels reveal gradual adoption of domesticated plants and animals, as if the demands of maintaining the site forced its builders to develop new approaches to food production. The monuments themselves may have been the catalyst that drove humanity's transition from foraging to farming. This perspective transforms our understanding of why Göbekli Tepe was eventually buried. Rather than representing the abandonment of an obsolete religious site, the burial may have marked the completion of a successful transformation, the point at which the social and technological innovations driven by the demands of monument maintenance had created new forms of human organization that no longer required the old gathering systems. The careful, deliberate nature of the burial supports this interpretation. This wasn't destruction or abandonment, but rather a kind of graduation ceremony, a formal acknowledgement that the lessons embedded in the monuments had been successfully learned and internalized by the communities that built them. The physical structures could be retired because they had accomplished their purpose. They had transformed their builders from one kind of human society into another. In choosing to preserve the monuments through burial rather than simply abandoning them, the final generation of builders may have been acknowledging the historical significance of what they had accomplished. They were the bridge between two worlds, the world of mobile hunter-gatherers that had sustained humanity for tens of thousands of years, and the world of settled agricultural communities that would eventually give rise to cities, writing, and all the complexities of recorded history. The rediscovery of Göbekli Tepe in the late 20th century has forced archaeologists and historians to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human development and social organization. We can no longer maintain the simple narrative that portrays our ancestors as gradually, linearly progressing from primitive to sophisticated, from simple to complex, from nomadic to settled. The builders of Göbekli Tepe achieved sophistication in forms we're only beginning to understand, creating complex societies without cities, preserving sophisticated knowledge without writing, coordinating vast projects without centralized states. Their example suggests that human creativity and social organization have taken forms throughout our history that don't fit our modern categories. They remind us that the path from our ancestral origins to our present condition wasn't a straight line of constant progress, but rather a complex journey involving multiple experiments, alternative approaches, and roads not taken that might have led to entirely different destinations. Perhaps most importantly, Göbekli Tepe challenges us to expand our conception of what it means to be human. The people who built these monuments weren't a different species from ourselves. They shared our biology, our cognitive capabilities, our fundamental drives toward meaning, connection, and transcendence. Their achievements suggest that the potential for sophisticated thought, complex social organization, and monumental creativity has been part of human nature far longer than we previously imagined. In our modern world, where technological change happens at dizzying speed and social institutions seem increasingly fragile, there's something profoundly comforting about the endurance of these ancient stones. They remind us that humans have always been capable of creating things meant to last, of conceiving projects that transcend individual lifetimes, of finding ways to preserve what matters most across the vicissitudes of historical change. The lessons of Göbekli Tepe aren't just about our past. They're about our potential. They suggest that human societies can achieve remarkable things when they're organized around shared purposes that transcend immediate material needs, when they're willing to invest in projects whose benefits extend far beyond their creators' lifetimes, when they understand that the most important human achievements often involve creation rather than consumption. As we stand among these weathered stones in the gentle light of morning, we're connected across 12 millennia to people who shared our deepest human characteristics. Our curiosity about the world around us, our need for meaning and connection, our drive to create something beautiful and lasting. Their monument to human possibility stands before us, patient as stone, enduring as hope, waiting for each new generation to discover what it means to be truly human. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe may never be completely solved. We may never fully understand what drove its builders to undertake such ambitious projects, what beliefs sustained them through generations of construction, what ceremonies filled their stone circles with meaning and purpose. But perhaps that's as it should be. Some mysteries are more valuable as questions than as answers, more powerful as inspiration than as solved puzzles. What we can say with certainty is that Göbekli Tepe stands as proof of human potential, evidence that our species has always been capable of remarkable achievements when united by shared vision and sustained by collective purpose. In our own time of global challenges and uncertain futures, these ancient stones remind us that humans have always found ways to create meaning from mystery, to build beauty from stone, to leave something lasting for future generations to discover and wonder at. And so we leave Göbekli Tepe as we found it, ancient, mysterious, magnificent, but with our understanding of our own human story forever changed. In the silence of these weathered stones, we've heard echoes of the first dawn of human civilization, whispers of possibilities we're still learning to imagine, promises of what we might yet accomplish when we remember that we are the descendants of people who could dream in stone and make those dreams real. Sleep well, dear listeners, and dream of ancient stones and the remarkable people who carved meaning into eternity. Until we meet again in the gentle embrace of history's whispered stories, may your rest be peaceful and your dreams filled with wonder.